Today discussing the subject of general custom or urf. I'll be just looking at the meaning and definition of urf, its varieties, its relationship with the Sunnah, general consensus, fatwa and ijtihad, and whether there is any proof in the Quran and Sunnah in support of urf, and its application in modern law. Literally, urf in Arabic means it is derived from the root word arafa, to know. And urf is that which is known and familiar. In the Quran we have the word urf used, also ma'ruf, that which is known and recommended. There is a parallel word to urf, and that is aada. Aada is used interchangeably with urf, but there is a little difference in the sense that aada can be used in reference to both individual and communities. To say that this is the custom or aada of Ahmad or of the community in Australia. When you say urf, you refer to a multitude. This is the urf of that community. You don't say this is the urf of Ahmad. But this difference in mind, the ulama have almost used urf and aada interchangeably. The definition of custom or urf is that it is a recurrent practice that is reasonable and acceptable to the people of sound nature. Recurring practices means that it is regularly practiced and it is very well known and it is reasonable and acceptable. If something is unreasonable, irrational, or it is harmful and prejudicial, it does not qualify the meaning or the definition of urf. We have in the Quran of this expression very frequently occurring, amr bil ma'ruf, commanding that which is good and recommended. This derives from the same root, but as I will discuss, there is some difficulty. The ulama do not seem to accept urf in the same open spirit as other legal traditions do. And there is a reason for it. Despite the fact that we have in the Quran a passage in Surah 7, Ayah 199, which says, take to forgiveness, command that which is according to custom, and turn away from the ignorant. خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. The majority of scholars say that urf in this verse implies its literal dictionary meaning. It's not a reference to the custom of society. Although there is disagreement on this, Al-Qarafi from the Maliki school that says that this is a text in the Quran on the authority of custom as a source of law and judgment. But because of its instability in the fact that custom sometimes is changeable, and also to see this meaning, take to forgiveness, command that which is according to custom. This is not the reading of that the jurist has offered. Command that which is good, which is familiar, and which is recommendable, not necessarily that which is in accordance with custom. Custom can sometimes be misguided, it may be changeable. The Sharia cannot subjugate itself to the dictates of urf. That is the understanding. Despite these reservations, and I will elaborate this further, we have several legal maxims that are recorded in the Mujalla, the Ottoman Mujalla. For example, the Ada is a basis of judgment. Al-Adatu Muhakkamatu. That is, custom is the basis of judgment. In another legal maxim we read, what is proven by custom is like that which is proven by the text. As-sabitu bil-urfi kas-sabit bin-nas. And in reality, custom, general custom and urf has played an important role in the development of Islamic law, in the development of fatwa, in ijtihad, even in the interpretation of the Quran. For example, in Surah 65, verse 7, there is a verse which reads that وَلْيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِّن سَعَةٍ. Let one who can afford to spend by way of nafaqah. Nafaqah, that is support and maintenance to close relatives. Now the Quran makes a general reference that nafaqah or maintenance is a requirement, but the quantity of how much is given to each particular relative, this is something that is determined by reference to the general custom. And the formulation of ijtihad, even in changing the existing fatwa in ijtihad, custom has played a role. We know, for example, that Imam Shafi established 2 schools when he was in Baghdad, the old school. Then in the last 5 years of his life he traveled to Egypt, and then gradually he found that the earlier rulings that he had issued were so different in accordance with the custom of Egypt. To contextualize those rulings with the custom of Egypt, he changes a great deal of his earlier rulings and fatwas. Then also custom, the Arab custom of the Arab society has played an important role in the embodiment of the Sunnah of the Prophet, especially a variety of the Sunnah known as tacitly approved Sunnah or Sunnah Taqririyah. The Prophet overruled the kind of Arab custom that was contrary to the spirit of Islam, prejudicial and oppressive, but many of the customary practices also survived, and he did not oppose to it, and it gradually became part of the tacitly approved Sunnah of the Prophet. Even after the Prophet's demise, the companions often said, we used to do such and such during the lifetime of the Prophet. And this is a reference again that this was something, a customary practice that the Prophet himself did not object to. It becomes authoritative. Some aspects of the Arab custom have survived. For example, the aqila that plays the close relative and kinsman, tribal within the context of tribes and clans. The tribesmen paid the blood money on behalf of the person who committed an offense from among them. It was something, a collective responsibility of the clan and tribe to pay compensation for the crime of one of its members. It was almost like establishing social control, that people must not commit crime. That was also taken and became part of the Sharia. There are certain transactions, mortgage for example, the forward sale of salam, in the rule of kafa'a that requires equality in marriage between the 2 prospective spouses. These were also customary during the lifetime of the Prophet, and he approved them, and it became part of the fiqh and sharia of Islam. And then in the law of inheritance, we find that the importance of the male line of descent, that is the agnatic relatives, the asaba, they become a point of reference in the entitlement to shares in the law of inheritance, and this was also customary in Arab societies. The Maliki doctrine that we have, the practice of the people of Medina, is also a reference to the importance of amal, the practice of the people of Medina. In so many ways we find that custom has influenced ijtihad, the rules of consensus in Ijma, in what we consider to be for public interest. But in order for custom to be a valid basis of law in judgment, it must fulfill certain conditions. What are those conditions? First, that the custom must be recurrent and dominant, regularly practiced and known to everyone in society. If it is not recurrent, if some isolated few people know about it and practice it, others don't, it would not qualify as custom. And this is clearly stated in the Article 14 of the Mujalla, Ottoman Mujalla. All of this is actually can be consulted in my book. There is a chapter on custom, page 369 to 382. The detail can be consulted. Similarly, in everyday transactions, when we, for example, buy or sell a house or a car, what is exactly included in the house or in a car when you buy, or not included? This is determined by general custom of society and people. If there are two varieties of customs on the same point practiced by a community, for example, two types of currencies, and you write a document and you do not specify, then we refer to the one which is more recurrent, is more dominant. That would be the way to specify. Second condition is that the custom must be in existence at the time a certain transaction or contract is concluded. Then it applies to those transactions, but documents and transactions that were concluded before the recognition or coming about of a particular custom would not fall under that particular custom. In other words, the custom must exist in order to be applicable to transactions, the interpretation of contracts and documents. We must know that that particular custom existed at the time. The third condition that custom must fulfill is that it must not contravene the rules or the provisions of contract and agreement. Explicit provisions of agreement and contract among individuals prevail over customary practices. For example, there is a legal maxim that a contract is the sharia of the contracting parties. Al-aqdu shari'atul aqidain. If we have, for example, in the payment of dawah in marriage, if the custom is such that you pay half now and half on a later occasion, but the contract of marriage provide that the dower must all be paid at the time of the contract, then this would prevail and not the existing custom about that matter. And lastly, the condition that custom must fulfill, that it must not be contrary to the text in the injunctions of the Sharia. For example, usury or riba may be widely practiced, as it is in fact very widely practiced in the banking and finance world. But since there is a clear text that it is prohibited in the Quran, then it cannot be accepted. A custom, in order to be accepted, must not violate the clear dictates or mandate of a text. If, for example, the conflict between text and custom may be total, as in the example of riba, or it may be partial. If it is a partial conflict, then custom is allowed actually to limit the application of the text as a specifier of the text. We have, for example, in the hadith on the subject of forward sale or salam, that the Prophet forbade the sale of that which does not exist at the time of transaction. But he made a concession with reference to salam. نهى عن البيع ما ليس عند الإنسان ورخص في السلام. He prohibited the sale of what is non-existent, but in forward sale the item, the subject matter does not exist. Now we come to another contract, that is a manufacturing contract or istisna. In a manufacturing contract, when you order a house to be made for you, the house does not exist at the time, and you don't even pay for it all the price. So both of the counter values are non-existent. Since there is now a partial conflict, then we say that the custom of society has accepted the contract of istisna, manufacturing contract, and it therefore limits the application of the text. We accept what is said in the hadith, but we make exception with reference to these contracts. When you appoint a wakil or a representative to represent you in the purchase of a house, you do not specify his limits of authority. But the custom does limit his authority. He cannot buy that house for you for double the kind of customary price. So custom actually limits the text and the authority of the rules, the application of the rules of Sharia. I now just briefly differentiate custom and Ijma, general consensus. And Ijma are two different concepts, although they relate to one another and there are common points. Firstly, that consensus is the prerogative only of the learned, the mujtahid, whereas urf is for all society, layman and jurists all included. The other is that custom has an element of continuity. Over time it continues, whereas ijma can come about instantaneously if the ulama determine such, and continuity is not a requirement. The other is that custom is changeable, whereas ijma, once finalized, ijma is not likely to be subject to change. The types of custom. There are about 6 varieties of custom or urf that are discussed in the fiqh literature, and they are simple varieties. Firstly, the verbal and the actual custom. Verbal custom refers to the dictionary use of words. Sometimes words are used by people with a different meaning to that of their different dictionary meaning. When we say, for example, salat, zakat, hajj, prayer, charity, a pilgrimage, these are used in their customary meaning, not by their literal meaning, because literally salat means prayer, zakat means purification, hajj means a visit. But when we use these, the customary usage of these is generally accepted, and it suppresses the literal meaning of these words. Sometimes in the Quran it's the opposite. For example, the Quran uses laham, the word meat, in reference to fish, whereas customarily the Arabs do not use the word laham to imply fish, samak is used. If you pronounce a statement, make a statement that I will not set foot in the house of so and so, and you go and literally put your step in the door, and you take an oath that you will not do so. Are you responsible in? Have you broken your oath by simply putting your foot? No. Customarily, when people say I will not set foot, it means to enter the house, not literally to put yours. So here you have all the examples, that the verbal examples of verbal custom. Then actual custom. Actual custom is that which is custom practiced by people in reference to the payment of dawah, for example. Customarily, half of it is paid at the time of marriage, half of it is paid later. That is actual custom. Then another variety is general custom and specific. General custom is that which is universally applied, like bay al-ta'ati, the give and take sale. You go to the supermarket and to places, you put your money and take the object without pronouncing the offer in acceptance. This is customarily accepted. This is general custom, and it prevails over the specifics of contract. Then we have specific or particular custom which are applied in communities, in trades and professions. The lawyers, for example, the stockbrokers, they have their own customary practices. Generally speaking, it is a general custom that is authoritative and prevails over the normal rules of qiyas and fiqh. But there is a substantive body of opinion that both general and specific custom are authoritative. And the last variety is valid custom and invalid custom. Sahih, urf sahih, and urf fasid. Sahih is that which is not contrary to Sharia or to the principles of Islam, as we said, with reference to the payment of dawah. That is not objectionable. But custom may be objectionable from the viewpoint of Sharia. In tribal societies, women are deprived of their share in inheritance, despite the fact that the Sharia gives them a share. This is a corrupt custom. It's not acceptable. It's fasid. Is there a proof to tell us in the Quran and Sunnah that custom is a source of judgment, of law and judgment? Jurists have referred to verses in Surah 22, verse 78, that Allah does not intend to impose hardship upon you or to make religion as a means of inflicting hardship. This is used as an authority, the textual authority for urf, because if you reject and violate urf, deny its validity, it's likely to cause hardship to the people, and therefore it is subsumed by this verse, and not the verse I earlier quoted, take to forgiveness and command urf and turn away from the ignorant. There is some disagreement that when the Quran mentions urf and ma'ruf, it means that which is acceptable to the Sharia, which is good, which is familiar, and not necessarily that which people practice. A hadith is quoted that what the Muslims sees to be good is good in the eyes of God. مَا رَآهُ الْمُسْلِمُونَ حَسَنًا فَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ حَسَنًا. That it is good in the eyes of God. And despite on the authority that we find in the wide role that custom plays in society, in the formulation of fiqh, in the sunnah, in other areas of sharia, yet the ulama have actually not given it the space, the recognition that in reality it merits. This is because the Sharia, there are two sources of authority. One is divine revelation, that is the command and will of Allah. The other is urf, that is the will and command of the people. We recognize the first as the higher authority, although we do acknowledge a certain role, but not without some reservations and limits. In modern times, the custom has become a little less stable. Societies have become mobile, people move, frequent mobility affects the stability of the custom. The other factor that also influences that the affairs of society, law in government is dictated and regulated by statutory legislation. In the space left for urf is becoming increasingly limited. But urf has played a role even in the change of fatwa. Sometimes the ulama, as I earlier said, at one time, and that for those who taught the Quran, for example, the Hanafi mazhab and other mazahib did not entitle the teacher of the Quran to a fee. They thought this is a spiritual something that merits spiritual reward. It does not necessarily to be paid for. But later it was known that people would not teach it unless there was some kind of payment, and then the ulama changed that fatwa and accepted that the Quran teaching may be paid for. Also, when we when we mention the word fraud or ghaban in fiqh, that it is prohibited, but what exactly it is? Ghaban is, or fraudulent dealing, is often determined by reference to society, the practice of people. And I think there are other examples that I have used in my chapter that I conclude my discussion of the subject of urf.